Hello my friend. Today the church asked us to review a professional GPU from 2009, the NVIDIA Quadro FX 1800. According to one of the gods, NVIDIA, the Quadro FX 1800 professional graphics solution architected for leading-edge manufacturing and design and companies providing them a complete toolset to create innovative designs. In other words, the target demographic for this GPU was industries and professional market, not the consumer one. So the card wasn't really designed to play video games. If we compare this GPU to the original 9800 GT released in 2008, we can see that it will make no sense to take a Quadro FX 1800 instead of a 9800 GT. The GT has a faster clock speed, a faster memory speed, and a bigger memory bus, and the nail in the coffin is the GT was way cheaper. $160 USD for the GT and a little bit less than $500 USD for the FX. The only thing the FX had for himself was a little bit more VRAM. So why someone would take the Quadro FX 1800 instead of a 9800 GT? 3-word: peace of mind. The Quadros had better software compatibility and driver support for their intended use, like in servers, 3D modeling, simulation, etc. Also, the fact that the Quadro FX 1800 doesn't draw a lot of power, making it possible to run with only the power of the PCIe. Also, it's less of an hassle to plug a bunch of these GPU in a server and make them also cooler due to their low TDP of 59 watts. But the church doesn't really care of these advantages. We only want the data of them running different games. So, can't this whole professional GPU game? First of all, I decided to overclock the GPU to get the most out of it, and I'm quite surprised of the results. I was able to overclock the GPU clock from 550 MHz to a 714 MHz, which is shy from a 30% faster clock speed, and the memory clock from 800 MHz to 1040 MHz, which was the maximum I could get from the GPU. First off, we have CSGO in Dust 2 with bots, with the lowest setting at 720p. At first, I tried playing in 1080p, but the game had some stutters, which in this type of game is not something you really want. It had a good average of 61 FPS, but the 1% low of 32 FPS and the frame time wasn't very stable. I reduced the resolution to 720p and the game was a lot smoother, with an average of 91 FPS and a 1% low of 46 FPS. When looking at smoke or Molotov fire, the game was still able to keep a good frame rate. In Minecraft, the game wasn't very stable with the overclock and was crashing, so I reduced a little bit the overclock to 700 MHz for the core and 1030 MHz for the memory, and the game was finally stable. With the graphics at fast and a 12 chunk render distance, the game was averaging a 71 FPS with a 1% low of 27 FPS in the jungle biome at 1080p. After that, in Garry's Mod with the highest settings, without anti-aliasing at 1080p, I decided to explode some NPCs to see if the GPU could handle it. With an average of 57 FPS and a low 1% of 14 FPS, due to the bombs that I exploded, I'm pretty sure Garry's Mod would be playable in all game modes. I wanted to try SnowRunner, but due to the card not supporting DirectX 11, I decided to try the previous title, MudRunner. In 1080p with all graphical setting off, the frame time was, let's just say, weird, and there was a little bit of stuttering, but the frame rate had an average of 42 FPS and a 1% low of 10 FPS, making the game not very enjoyable. Maybe in 720p the gameplay would be better. Released in 2009, like the GPU, Batman Arkham Asylum was very playable at 1080p with all the setting on the lowest option. I wanted to try this game because it would give a good picture on how the GPU would perform in games of its time. The GPU did very well by being always at the maximum FPS the game could run, with rarely going below 60 FPS. You could probably get away with augmenting some settings, but I prefer the gameplay being smooth. Nonetheless, I would have been disappointed with the performance in gaming for the card at this price. But once again, it wasn't designed for gaming. For PS2 emulation, the card was able to get double the native resolution. There was some stutter, but the game was playable. For Dolphin, Mario Galaxy 2 was able to be in double the native resolution without any slowdowns. As for GTA 5, in 720p, with the lowest settings, the game had an average of 39 FPS and a 1% low of 20 FPS. Finally, here's a bunch of interesting titles that I tested on the Quadro FX 1800. Even with a huge overclock, I think the performance of this graphics card was quite subpar compared to the previous card that I've tested. I needed to reduce the resolution or lowering the settings to get almost the same FPS. On the other hand, the card would be useful in a PC without 6-pin power, but there are better choices on the market than this GPU. The biggest flaw of the GPU is probably that it doesn't support DirectX 11, but we could say the same of any older GPU. My friend, if the church wants any other game tested, I'll be happy to send the results. May the gods and their drivers be merciful. My regards, Nick.